Tonight's test score presentation looks very similar to last year's. We're using the state template that they put out for this purpose, for the board presentation. And for the most part, the presentation is as the template is, with a couple of revisions I'll tell you as we go along. So as a reminder, these test scores from 2016 is the second set of test scores we have. So we have 2015, the first year of PARCC, 2016, the second year of PARCC. And that gives us the opportunity to look both year to year and by cohort. That's one of the revisions, probably the biggest revision that I made to this. The state puts out their template to just look year to year, and that's different students. That's looking at how did the 2015 10th graders do against the 2016 10th graders. And that can be valuable as well, but the real value comes in looking at the cohorts of students, the same students. How did they perform from one year to the next? So you'll see both of those in this for our district. As a reminder as well, students took English language arts tests in grades 3 through 11 and math tests in 3 through 8, and then those specialized end of course tests for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Also as a reminder, there were 5 levels of performance, demonstrating proficiency from level 1, where a child is not yet meeting expectations, up through levels 4 and 5, which are considered proficient, because the student is meeting or exceeding the expectations. None of that has changed from last year. So this, and you have the copies in front of you because I know the lighting is a little off, but this first slide of results is the state results on English language arts. And so what you see represented here is every grade that tested in English language arts, and then how they scored among the 5 levels in both 2015 and 2016 for the state. Now what the state does over here, and what you will see later on even for our own district, is this percent change. The percent change in levels 1 and 2 and the percent change in levels 4 and 5. So that means, how did the percentage change of students who got either a 1 or a 2? Did more kids get a 1 or 2 or less kids get a 1 or 2? And the same for 4 and 5. What you want to see is that the level 1 and 2 percentage went down. Less kids were at the lower end of performance. And you want to see that the higher end of performance had more kids there. So that's a picture of how the state did, and you see the state went down in every area except grade 11 language arts, which we'll even talk about again later. And the state went up in every area except 11th grade language arts in terms of how many students were proficient. That's language arts. Here's statewide math. Same thing again. You see the grades or the higher level courses represented here, the 5 levels of performance there, 2 years, 2015, 2016, and then the percentage change in level 1 and 2 scoring and level 4 and 5 scoring. In math, in every area, the state went down in level 1 and 2s and up in level 4 and 5. Now remember, because it is an important distinction, so I might say it a couple times, these are different students. So when you're looking at the 2015 6th grade and comparing them to the 2016 6th grade, they're different kids. That's why I think it's important to look at the cohorts. But in any event, this is still the data we have for that year-to-year comparison. The state also measured the number of students tested statewide. So for each grade, represented here, how many actual students were tested and what was the increase. So there was an overall increase in the state, 56,000 more kids testing English language arts, and you see by grade how many more tested statewide. They do the same thing for math, and the results are very similar, an overall increase of testers and an increase in every grade level. And now we get into our district results. So again, this is much like the slide you just saw, the 2 slides for English and math that you just saw for the state. This is our district by grade, and among the 5 levels, a comparison of the 2015 percentage in that level and the 2016 percentage in that level. different kids. So when I look at 7th grade, 3% of 7th graders were at level 1, not meeting expectations. In 2015, 3%. And then in 2016, 2% were now at level 1. 2 different groups of kids. And then for math as well, the scores are broken out exactly the same way. The grades or the higher level courses here, and the scores along the top. And again, we'll take 7th grade. Over here in level 5, the highest score, 13% in 2015, and again, 13% in 2016 at that grade level. This is a comparison of how our students did in terms of the percent changes in level 1 and 2. So you remember that slide. What percentage of students scored level 1 and 2 in one year, and what was that change to the next year in level 1 and 2 and level 4 and 5? Again, different students. So you see here where I mentioned the state had a fewer percentage of students receiving 1s and 2s in all areas except 11th grade. We had some less and a couple more. Level 4 and 5, the state had all higher percentages in level 4 and 5 proficiency except 11th grade, and we had mostly higher and a couple lower. Now, that's why I try to emphasize that it's different students. So when you see like a 1% change or no change, you are talking about different groups of kids. The 2015 ninth graders are not the 2016 ninth graders. They're totally different kids. So you would expect to see a little fluctuation. But I will point out a very big fluctuation that I want to talk about right here in 11th grade. So you heard me say that the state performed better in all grade levels except 11th in English Language Arts. And for us, 11th grade English Language Arts also comes up like, wow, 25% more kids got a 1 or a 2, and 33% less were proficient at 4 and 5. So I want to talk about that for a minute. The 2015 11th graders against the 2016 11th graders. That's what we're talking about. The 2015 11th graders happened to do exceptionally well on PARCC English Language Arts. We were 15th in the state, and we were 3rd in our DFG. So they did exceptionally well. So right off the bat, I could say that. But I go a little deeper now. When I look at those 2016 11th graders, when they were in 10th grade the year before, and they were proficient, 17% of them who were proficient in 10th grade didn't take it in 11th grade. So right off the bat, you take them out. You take those high achieving scorers out of the mix. They didn't take it. Whether that's because they met their proficiency already and they didn't take it. So they're out. You go a little deeper, and I'll tell you that out of those proficient 4s and 5s when they were in 10th grade, now they get to be 11th grade 2016 kids, 31% of them drop 2 or more levels. Now, to us, that screams a lack of effort. Because, you know, a difference of a level between 2 levels is one thing. But to drop 2 levels when you were proficient or exceedingly proficient does signal to us something else going on there. So, you know, a high schooler meets a graduation requirement, and then maybe they say, well, I'll take it, but, you know, that effort is not there. Because that's a very, very big drop. And I don't think it's just attributable to, well, that was a great class in 2015. The 2016 11th graders had their highest performers either not taking it or dropping unexpectedly much lower than they were. So that's why I wanted to draw your attention to that, even though the state itself had some trouble with 11th grade. I think it's interesting to see what our students did. In math, you'll recall the state had gone down in all their 1s and 2 areas and gone up in all their 4s and 5s. For the most part, we were going down in 1s and 2s and going up in 4s and 5s, and they are at much less percentages where we are not maybe doing what the state is doing. You know, where we have, you know, an increase over here in geometry of 1s and 2s, it's a 1%. So these are low percentages, and even the percentages of the state are not high. They did better, but they weren't, you know, over like double digit well. So we do see these. We see those couple of areas where, that's interesting that that group of kids performed a little better than that group of kids. But again, it's really going to come in looking at the cohort that we want to get valuable information that can really inform how to design our instruction for those particular students, because we can look at their growth, not comparing them against someone else. So that's what I did on this slide. This is the cohorts, that says up there, comparison of cohorts tested. So the cohort is just the same group of kids. So you'll see represented here the grade the students were in 2015 and then the grade they were in 2016. So this group of kids were the 3rd graders in 15 and the 4th graders in 16. And they were the 4th graders in 15 and the 5th graders in 16, and so on. This is English Language Arts. So what I have here is the percentage proficient here, the percentage that we're meeting or exceeding expectation, level 4 or 5, and then the level 4s and 5s the following year in those same kids, and the growth. Overall, an 8% growth of our kids district-wide. And my eye goes here to this 11% down, this group of kids, last year's 10th graders. So the kids who are sitting in 11th grade right now, 11% decrease in proficiency. So that's where I dig a little deeper. Of these kids who were proficient in 9th grade, 17% of those kids dropped 2 or more levels from being proficient or exceedingly proficient to way down. And so again, we say at the high school level, if you've met your requirement, are you putting forth that effort? You need to the next time you take it. In mathematics, same thing. Grade 3 in 2015, grade 4 in 2016. These are their proficiency percentages in both years, and then the difference. So we're 2% up overall in math across the district. And although 9 isn't as high as 11, we still want to look at that. This group who was in Algebra 1 and then Geometry last year and now sits in Algebra 2 this year, why did they go down? And there, we see that these Algebra 1 kids who were proficient, they were meeting or exceeding, 33% of them did not take the geometry test. So again, you're taking your highest performers, and they're just not even taking it. And so when you consider that, you say, oh, okay. That gives you a little bit of an explanation behind that 9% drop. Of course, we still look at it. We still want to dig a little deeper by student maybe and look at the standards that they're struggling with, but it is good for us to look at reasons as well. So again, the total change up 2%. Both areas went up overall. Our district-wide number of students tested, just like that state slide, by grade for English Language Arts, comparison of the 2 years, increased in every grade level except 3, but overall an increase of 165 students testing. And in math, same thing, grade 3 was the only grade that had a decrease, but an overall increase district-wide of 129 students. The state also provides for a comparison between your district and then the state and the NAPE. NAPE, for those of you who may not know, is a national sampling of student proficiency. National Association of Educational Progress, but that's what it means. They are sampling schools throughout the country to see how well they are performing in English and math, grades 4, and then grade 8 for English Language Arts. In all cases, Parsippany, which is those percentages at the top, Parsippany is higher than both the state and the NAPE in all those areas, 4 and 8 English and 4 math. The template also provides for, and those of you in the audience who are parents, provides for some links to helpful resources for understanding your child's score. And finally, the state provides for some questions that districts reflect upon when they look at their scores and try to connect them to what's going on in the classroom. And that concludes the presentation. If there are any questions about the presentation or about instruction or program, and Dr. Charney can answer those. Oh, hi.
I got it. Okay. I guess the question that I have is, are we going to see next year lower numbers as well? Because, I mean, that was my question from the beginning when, you know, the state said, well, we weren't going to require anything till 2020. And my concern was, then how do you motivate the kids to, one, try and do well, two, take the test, period. So we're going to, I mean, it looks like we're going to just see this continue, because what else are we going to do? I mean, how do we motivate them to take the test and do well?
I know that's something Dr. Seitz was talking already to building principals about, so I don't know, Dr. Seitz, if you want to say anything, but I know that we're cognizant of that, and like I said, I know he's already reached out to the principals and started discussions about motivating students to participate.
Until this becomes a state requirement for graduation, participation for those students who do well is going to be extremely difficult, and even for those students who are struggling, there are alternative assessments that they may perceive as being easier that will allow them to meet the graduation requirements. So we'll do our best. We certainly will encourage our students. We'll encourage our parents to encourage their children to do well on these tests. But at the upper levels in particular, I think it's going to be very hard. I'm hopeful at the elementary and middle school levels, where this is used to inform our instruction, that our teachers and administrators and parents encourage our students to do well, because that helps us refine the instructional program. And it is important because, as I think everyone knows now, the evaluations of teachers and administrators, principals in particular, are based to a significant amount on how our students do in the PARCC testing program. And I do want to emphasize that PARCC is a growth model, which means it's not mastering a skill, it's saying this is where you are in September, this is where we want you to be in May, and it's our job to get the students to that new level. So we will be working with all the stakeholders in the district to try and make that happen. But at the upper grade levels, if a child passes Algebra 1, meets their graduation requirement, it's going to be hard to motivate them to do a geometry. And I think the example that Dr. Giganti just gave us with the 33% drop and 17% of the kids not taking it and the others dropping 2 levels just reflects what we're seeing, and I suspect it reflects what's going on across the state. It's nice, it's a good model in some ways, it's a weak model in other ways, the PARCC rollout.
Just along the same lines, other than the graduation rate, is there any consequence for the 10th and 11th graders going down? Like, is there any other consequence that the state is going, like PARCC or anything else, that would be affected by us not maintaining proficient levels in those grades?
In the district?
Yes.
Not that we have heard so far that there would be consequences. Again, what they've released are graduation requirements, and those seem like the only consequences. We'll have to see.
Mrs. Hawthorne?
Out of curiosity, when do parents get this information? Has it already been sent home?
Yes. Yeah. I did a little presentation at the PTA Council for those PTAs, and then they were sent home, and we have links on our website to that and more.
Okay. And is there any other avenue parents have to reach out if they need help to interpret?
Yeah, the letter that accompanied the scores explained, please contact your school's principal. The principal is, very well able to discuss the scores with the parents.
Okay, good.
Mr. Jocko.
Dr. Giganti, thanks for the presentation. It was very informative. I'm interested, especially in the cohorts. So as we get more years of PARCC under our belt, will we see an expansion of cohorts from 2 years to 3 years to 4 years, or will it be a rotating and you'll leave it at 2? How will we look at the data in the future?
I don't know that I know that answer, but certainly the superintendent is the one who drives how this is presented to you. So any suggestions you have, the superintendent will listen to, and then that's how the presentation will be constructed.
Thank you. And the second question, either for Dr. Seitz or yourself, now that we've got 2 years of data, I presume we're going to look at the data a little bit more closely to come up with a plan to see how it will impact instructional programs. Just generally, what's the next steps with PARCC data?
We certainly use PARCC data to drive our student growth objectives, which are required of all teachers. In addition to Linkit data, which is aligned to the Common Core standards and has PARCC-like questions. So this year in particular, in grades 3, 4, and 5, we are asking our teachers who have to use multiple criteria to use the PARCC data and Linkit data, as well as Fontes and Pinella, to use that data to drive their student growth objectives. And again, I think it's important to recognize that with the use of a program like Linkit, the teachers were able to take the Linkit data, take past data that they have for those students, and break it down within their classroom by standard, and therefore they can group their students based on their needs. So this should be very helpful in driving instruction. And with the way it's structured, as I said earlier, it becomes significant because student results now directly impact the evaluations of teachers and administrators. So we'll be using it, and these software programs are evolving over time, and we certainly anticipate that as the software gets more sophisticated, it will give us greater opportunity to inform instruction. I know Linkit right now is, I believe, at a stage where, based on the pre-assessment which is given in September, they will give the teachers a projection of what that student's growth should be over the course of the year. So it's becoming more sophisticated, more effective, a little more frightening, because we are now asking teachers in particular to use assessment instruments which they have personally not developed. And I think that would make everyone feel a little uncomfortable if through your entire career you only used assessments that you developed, and the fact that your evaluation counts on those assessments. So we're going through a phase that will cause some anxiety. We had a meeting with our representative from the state, Paul Palick, and we went over what we are doing this year, and he found it to be fully acceptable. He found it to be in compliance with Teach NJ and Achieve NJ, and we anticipate bringing him back to work with our administrators to make sure they understand the process and are implementing the process appropriately. And certainly as we identify needs, we'll bring in outside consultants and our own people as necessary to work with our teachers to improve their use of programs like Lincoln and to make sure we are doing our best to improve student achievement.